The autumn winds howled across the vast fields of eastern Ukraine, carrying with them the echoes of artillery, broken orders, and desperate prayers. For months, Russia had boasted about its military power, promising quick victory. But now, the unthinkable had happened. Nearly 300,000 Russian troops were stranded, cut off from supplies, reinforcements, and escape routes. Ukraine had struck with precision, severing the lifeline that fed Russia's largest military grouping. Fuel convoys lay in smoldering ruins. Bridges once considered indestructible were reduced to twisted steel. What had seemed like a steady advance had suddenly turned into a death trap. In Moscow, the Kremlin's silence was deafening. Putin, sitting in his war council, slammed his fist on the table. His generals avoided eye contact. The room reeked of panic, but no one dared show it. The lifeline, the very artery keeping Russia's military machine alive, had been cut. On the battlefield, the stranded troops were beginning to feel the chokehold tighten. Soldiers scavenged abandoned Ukrainian homes for food. Fuel ran out, leaving tanks useless steel coffins in the mud. Helicopters could no longer fly frequent resupply missions. The skies were owned by Ukrainian drones and Western-supplied air defenses. The Ukrainian move was not just military genius, it was psychological warfare. They hadn't just trapped men, they had trapped Putin's pride, his carefully built image of invincibility. Across Europe, leaders watched in disbelief. News outlets reported, 300,000 Russian troops cut off, largest encirclement since World War II. Crowds in Poland, Germany, and the Baltic states cheered. For them, this wasn't just Ukraine's victory, it was proof that the Iron Bear could bleed. But inside Russia, fear spread like wildfire. Mothers of soldiers stormed military offices demanding answers. Social media, despite heavy censorship, overflowed with messages from trapped conscripts pleading for rescue. The Kremlin scrambled to shut down the leaks, but it was too late. The whole world could see, Putin's army was in deep crisis. And then came the shocking part, Putin himself seemed to unravel. His televised speeches grew angrier, his threats more erratic. He blamed NATO, he blamed traitors, he even hinted at nuclear options. But the truth was undeniable, Ukraine had cornered his army, and time was running out. The freezing nights of October turned into November. Snow fell over the battlefields, covering the stranded Russian troops like a shroud. Ukrainian loudspeakers blared across no man's land. Surrender, and you will live. Stay, and you will die here. Tens of thousands listened, some threw down their weapons. Others, loyal to Moscow or simply terrified of execution, dug deeper into trenches. But without food or ammunition, survival was a fading dream. In Moscow, Putin's inner circle fractured. Some urged him to negotiate, to save face before disaster became irreversible. Others whispered about total war, mobilizing every last man, even if it meant economic ruin. But Putin wasn't listening, he was consumed by rage. Intelligence leaks suggested he had screamed at his generals. You have betrayed me, I gave you everything, and you leave me humiliated before the world. Meanwhile, Ukraine tightened the noose. Precision strikes hit the last remaining Russian depots. Roads turned into graveyards of burned-out vehicles. Ukrainian special forces ambushed columns trying to break out. The once proud Russian war machine looked more like a scattered mob. And then, the moment the world had waited for came. Ukraine broadcast drone footage of thousands of Russian troops surrendering, hands raised, walking through fields under the white flag. Western media exploded, largest surrender in modern military history, Putin's army crumbles. The humiliation was unbearable in Moscow. Crowds gathered in the capital, some demanding accountability, others still shouting patriotic slogans. But something was changing, the fear barrier had cracked. For the first time, ordinary Russians openly asked, is this war worth it? Has our leader gone mad? Inside the Kremlin, whispers of a palace coup began to circulate. Putin, increasingly isolated, moved from bunker to bunker, obsessed with betrayal. His closest allies avoided him, fearing that a single word could trigger his wrath. Yet, even as defeat loomed, he refused to back down. In one chilling broadcast, he declared, if Russia must suffer, then the world will suffer with us. It was a thinly veiled nuclear threat. But Western intelligence quickly noted, his arsenal was aging, his command structure shaky, his threats less credible than ever. Meanwhile, in Kyiv, celebrations erupted. President Zelensky, addressing the world, said, Ukraine has proven that freedom is stronger than tyranny. Today we show the world, dictators can be defeated. The victory electrified Europe. NATO announced new security guarantees. The European Union pledged massive reconstruction aid. Across the democratic world, people believed they were witnessing a turning point in history, the day Putin's empire began to collapse. But for the 300,000 men stranded in Ukraine, the story was deeply personal. Some would never return home. Others would spend years in prisoner camps. And the mothers who once begged for their sons' return would ask a haunting question for generations. Why were they sent to die in a war that could never be won? The encirclement of 300,000 Russian troops was more than a military disaster, it was the breaking of an illusion. Putin, once seen as a master strategist, now looked reckless and desperate. His special operation had become the largest humiliation Russia had faced since the fall of the Soviet Union. And as the world watched, one truth became undeniable: the war that was supposed to secure Putin's legacy had instead destroyed it. Ukraine had cut the lifeline. And in doing so, they had not only stranded an army, they had stranded a dictator in the ruins of his own ambition.